I
Okay,
can
so
confirm you're live.
thank you very much. So welcome everybody to this afternoon's meeting of the Schools Forum. Just a couple of reminders from me to start with, please. This meeting's being conducted on Zoom in accordance with Bracknell Forest Council's remote meetings, protocols and procedures. And a reminder that meetings are open to the press and public. And in light of that, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. If I can ask that people turn their microphones off unless they're speaking, obviously, that will be helpful because that cuts out any extraneous noise. It is helpful if you keep your cameras on so that we can see who's here and who's participating. Obviously, there might be times when you need to switch off, but in general, I think we prefer people to be visible to any members of the press and public that are watching. We're not going to display papers on the screen. Those have been previously published, and I think all members of the forum have had a PDF copy emailed to them by Derek. Okay, and then we'll deal with the recommendations for each of the papers as they come along. I'd like to welcome Grant. Grant's joined us as an academy representative, a new academy school representative. Grant is a previous member of the Schools Forum. I can't remember when that was, Grant. Is it 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, it's about 3 years ago, I think, 3-4 years ago, you're right.
Okay, well, welcome back, Grant. I don't think anything has changed in the intervening period, except we were in this wonderful new format. And Jenny Baker is no longer a substitute member. Jenny is here. I can see Jenny. Jenny's here. She's actually formally replaced Peter Floyd as the special school representative. So welcome, Jenny, in that formal capacity. Welcome to Cherry. Cherry Hall is, Cherry, I can see Cherry now. Welcome to Cherry, who's going to present the childcare sufficiency assessment for us in a few minutes. And Joanna, Joanna's there. Joanna, can you complete the attendance register for us from what you can see on screen?
Yes, I'll be able to do that.
Okay. Now, there's one thing I'd like to do this afternoon, if nobody objects, and that is consider item 7, the item on the school's budget, before we get the update from Cheryl, because I think there are a number of things in the paper that Paul's going to present to us on the school's budget about the high needs block expenditure in particular. And I think it's just worth us reminding ourselves of the current position and some of the new factors that I think that have come into play since we probably discussed that last time. So if you don't mind, we'll do that one before we get the update from Cheryl, and that will give us a bit more context to deal with that. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah, thank you. So to the agenda then, Joanna, are there any apologies, please?
No apologies.
No apologies. Okay, can I ask if anybody has any declarations of interest that they wish to confer this afternoon? I can't see anybody. Okay, so let's move on then. The minutes of the meeting on 16th of September, can we agree that they are a correct record? Is everybody happy with that was here? Yeah. I'm not seeing any dissenting voices, dissenting faces. So can we look at the matters arising from that meeting? minute 196, Cherry's here today and she's going to present that report for us a bit earlier than we were anticipating, Cherry. You obviously haven't got enough to do, but you're very welcome this afternoon. Also, minute 196, Cheryl's going to present us with the High Needs Block action plan update later on. So that's great. Minute 197, Paul has completed the consultation with schools and will update us under item 8 on our agenda this afternoon. Those were the recorded matters arising. Is there anything else that we need to pick up on from those minutes? Or is everybody happy that we move on?
Sorry, Martin, can I just add one further point to those, if that's okay?
Yeah, of course.
So this is just an update. On page 8, that was looking at the 22-23 budget setting proposals at the last meeting. We did, you did agree that a number of requests would be made to the DfE about some special arrangements we wanted to put into place to Bracknell Forest, and there are 4 of those we've done. And just to give you an update on that, there's lots of these processes the DfE have to go through with a lot of local authorities, so they do them bit by bit. We don't get a response to all of them at the same time. But we've had 2 of those back so far, both agreeing to the proposals we wanted to make. And a key one to that is that they have agreed that we can continue to add funds to the school's budget from Bracknell Forest money to support this economy as a new school. So I just thought it's worthwhile saying that one's been agreed. The other ones, which may not be so significant in terms of all schools, we're still waiting for responses on a couple of those. One other's been approved conditionally. Whatever that means, I don't think that's going to be an issue with us, but we're expecting those other responses still to come back and agree with our request. So hopefully no surprises there. But the key one we were wanting a confirmation on was the council's permitted top of the fund. So that's been received.
Good, thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Is there anything else before we move on? No? Okay, so shall we move on then to item 4? And Cherry is going to present to us the childcare sufficiency assessment. We had one last year, Cherry, so a lot of the members of the forum will be very well aware of what you're presenting to us this afternoon, but perhaps you can give us a bit of an update, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Martin. It is earlier. It used to always be during the autumn term. I think last year it was later than usual, Martin. That's why it seems it's early this year.
Right, okay.
Normally the autumn term. So we do have to complete a childcare sufficiency assessment annually and report that to the executive member, and then produce it, publish it for our families. It's a really quite a complex assessment to do because the numbers fluctuate with providers, as with parents and childcare as well. And I think the last year's and this year's have been particularly challenging due to the pandemic. So the data is as good as we can possibly get it, but we do have plans to continue to improve the data that we can get. So the key messages, I suppose, from this year's assessment is that we continue to have sufficient childcare for our under 5 population. So for those children not yet at school, that includes our childcare for our 2, 3 and 4-year-old funded children and children who aren't accessing funding as well. So that's not a concern. In fact, the bigger concern, like some of the school places, is that perhaps in places there's too much childcare. Numbers of children are decreasing. However, one of the key things that we've noted with our funded children is that the numbers of children have decreased, but hours have increased for the same period over the 2 years. So it does appear that children are accessing more. That could be due to working pattern changes. We're not sure the reasons, but that's what it's telling us at the moment. The bigger concern and the more challenging area for us to look at is the older children. So that wraparound care, breakfast clubs, after school clubs and holiday clubs. It's a really difficult area to get really accurate data for. We've done the best we can. We know that the pandemic has changed parents' needs in that area. And I know for some settings, it was really difficult to offer breakfast clubs and after school clubs. Obviously, schools were in a very difficult situation and having to keep their bubbles, so it was difficult to have extra providers in. So it's still a changing picture. And for us, one of the main priorities for us in the following year is to really try and understand the impact the pandemic has had on parents and their childcare needs. I think for some parents, the wraparound care need has lessened with more people working from home.
Mm.
They've not necessarily needed as much childcare as they perhaps did pre-pandemic. And we want to begin to understand the ongoing impact on the childcare market in Bracknell Forest. And also looking at what changes there have been in the supply of childcare as well, because some out-of-school providers have perhaps stopped operating at the moment. But again, it's just sort of understanding that. And I know some schools have begun to look at whether they can operate their own wraparound childcare to meet the needs of their own community. So it's really beginning to understand that a bit more. And we want to try and understand where supply doesn't match demand and work with our providers to try and look at that. But until we can we're looking at how we can do ongoing consultation with parents to understand that demand. So that's a piece of work that we're sort of doing at the moment. And we want to help providers identify and understand opportunities in the childcare market. I'm sure colleagues on the call will understand that childcare is an expensive service to deliver, and it's understanding what is needed. So what can we do to support the providers to find out what's needed and how to operate and remain sustainable. The other key things that we're going to be looking at is, again, working with our providers and supporting them with sustainability. At the moment, we haven't had any group provision closed due to the pandemic from the early years market, which is really positive. However, we're still not through it, and I can't sit here and say that might not happen in the future, but we're keeping an eye on that and work closely with our providers around that. And again, looking at if there are other business opportunities, do they need to start earlier, finish later? Mm-hmm. So we'll work with them on that. Mm-hmm. And we have been actively promoting, I don't know, it'd be interesting, has anybody seen any of the adverts on the back of the buses in Bracknell with advertising childcare? And we are working to get the tuk-tuk advertising childcare over the next few months. So there's lots of promotional materials going on, and working with our community engagement team within the local authority. For some, we've identified that some of our European family, Eastern Europeans, are not necessarily accessing their entitlements. So we're looking at community groups to try and encourage that uptake as well. So I think that's about it, unless anybody's got any particular questions they'd like to ask.
No, I'm going to invite Sue, our early years representative, to see if there's anything that Sue wants to contribute.
Yeah.
Sue, is there anything that you want to say at this point?
I think I'd just reiterate everything, that Cherry has said. I, as the forum rep, feel incredibly proud of, early years and Cherry and her team for all the support as providers that we have been given, throughout the pandemic. It certainly hasn't been easy for, anyone in education, but particularly for us early years that, did remain open throughout the majority, of the pandemic.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Are there any other questions that members of the forum wish to put to Cherry? Roger.
Hi, Cherry.
Hi, Roger.
I noticed on page 23 that you put a graph down of projections going forward, and those numbers look to be much lower, actually, going forward, well, lower than up to 2020. And yet we have sort of house building and stuff going on. And I just wonder how those numbers have been arrived at. Now, I know it's very difficult to make accurate projections, and there have been issues in the past about that, but I'm just wondering about how these were calculated?
Yeah, all of the data that we use, Roger, thank you for that. I mean, at the moment, yes, the predictions are showing a decline in numbers. All the predictions are based on the ONS data. And so that they're the best predictions that we can do. I appreciate there is lots of new housing going up, but at the moment that new housing isn't generating children. So they're the best predictions we can do. David in my team, who does a lot of this work around the data, keeps an eye on that all of the time, and we will, change that data as and when it comes to us. But I've anecdotally been talking to our health colleagues as well, and whereas we felt there could be a potential increase due to the last 2 years, at the moment that's not necessarily happening. There seems to be a little bit of an increase when the first lockdown stopped. I'm not going to surmise why, but at the moment we haven't seen significant increase. So yeah, we use the best data available to us, really, Roger.
Okay.
Is there another question from anyone? I mean, Cherry,
Yes.
sorry,
Yes, please, Martin. If I could just ask a question, can I ask what the impact of the closure of the college nursery has had on provision, and whether all those children have found other provisions?
Yes, thank you, Jenny. We, as a council, some money was invested with another provider that is in a council building, and we created a new 0 to 2 room there, because that was the area from the college nursery that we were most concerned about. All of the older children, the 2+, there was plenty of provision in other settings with childminders, nurseries, preschools. It was the 0 to 2s. The 0 to 2 room opened, the new one opened in September, and numbers are growing there. And the positive with that, not only were we able to offer the amount of places at the college nursery, the provision is larger, so we could offer additional places. It's not yet full, but that's not unusual within the first term.
Lovely, thank you, Cherry.
Thank you.
Can
Who's
I
that?
just ask? It's Karen. Can I just
Okay,
ask,
Karen, go on.
hello, can I just ask Cherry a question? I can see that you've got some data gaps there, and mostly it's not early years, it's the school-based childcare that you've got the data gaps for. Is there anything we can do to help you with that, Cherry? As a provider ourselves, I'm obviously representing primary schools here, but Whitegrove's a provider. What data do you need from us? Because we've done our own analysis and asked our own parents, so there might be something you can tap into there.
That would be really interesting, Karen. I think what I could do is take that back to David and the team that do most of the work around this, and look at how that could help us in the coming assessment for sort of next year. I mean, we certainly want to look at some sort of portal that we can get that information on an ongoing basis, so that we're not, I feel sometimes for schools, for providers, for parents, they get this one-off opportunity to give the data, which isn't always going to be a suitable time for them. Whereas if we can have an ongoing basis that people can let us know what their numbers are like, whether they've got vacancies, then it's going to be much easier moving forward. So really be interested to have a conversation with you outside of this, Karen, if that's okay.
Yeah, because that's where the data gap is, isn't it, at school?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cherry, can I ask you a question about paragraph 3.2, where you talk about vacancies? I mean, my rough calculation is that you've got about 12 or 13% vacancies in the summer term, which is the term that you're saying is fullest.
Yes.
That must mean that the autumn and spring terms have got vacancies of much higher levels than that. And I'm just wondering about the sustainability of some of that provision. How do they actually manage?
That is the difficult question.
To run good businesses with such high vacancies.
Yeah, it's the difficult question. I'm sure it's one that Sue would like to come in on. I can see she's just put her camera back on. It is a really tricky time, and the summer term is always the busiest. People are doing perhaps more sessions in readiness for children going on to school, and then obviously the 4-year-olds then move or the majority of 4-year-olds move into school, into reception in the September. So the autumn is always the lowest term, and then it begins to build. It is an issue, Martin. And if anybody has got an answer to that, then I'm sure we would be happy to move with that. I think some settings will face their staffing. So sometimes staff are part-time during the times, building up to fuller times. But it's also about having to look at your business model over the year rather than looking at it just on a term-by-term basis. But it's a real balancing act. And Sue, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that.
Jerry, I'd love to.
I knew you would.
So autumn term is, sometimes verging on the impossible, but the positive is that over the academic year, your budgets will balance. And it is very unusual for our budgets to go anywhere near balancing in the autumn term. We're heavily reliant on, business overdraft facilities that we may have. With regards to staff, we offer a lot of temporary contracts, and then we will increase that contract as and when and if, of course, the numbers increase, in the setting. There's a lot that we have to do to get through autumn term. It's always really, really stressful. You're really, really worrying on what your books are going to look like. And of course, the year 8 you are then subsequently going to get from your accountant on why are you consistently running this business in autumn term. And, hand on my heart, I can say numerous times made quite a significant loss, which then puts huge pressure on you throughout the year that you have actually got to repair that damage and bring that income in. It's possible to cut costs because we're so regulated by Ofsted. Ofsted tell us how many staff we must have, what qualifications they must have. PPE costs have gone absolutely through the roof for obvious reasons over the last 12 months. But sadly, our funding rate hasn't gone anywhere near compensating us for putting ourselves through the pandemic with little financial support from the government, and indeed the way forward. I'd probably go as strongly to say, and I've got 2 setters in the borough and I've had them in the borough for, decades, that it is likely that if this continues, the PVI sector in early years in Bracknell Forest will not be here in 3 years' time, because we literally cannot afford to keep our businesses running consistently, at a loss. I know a lot of owners in Bracknell Forest that actually now have 2 jobs because their nurseries do not provide them with the income, and therefore they've had to get second employment because they can't make ends meet, which seems, ludicrous.
That's that's a hard message to hear, isn't it? And it's a message that you get nationally. I see that Gareth has joined us, and whilst it's not in your report, Cherry, the points that have just been made, I'm hoping that Gareth has noted those points when he has when he's aware of the discussions that are going on about sufficiency, both now and in the future.
Yeah, no, thank you, Martin. I mean, it's, I don't disagree with anything that Sue has said. I mean, we have these very open conversations during our early years forum meetings. We are aware of the difficulties for the sector, and we try to support as much as we can. But obviously the funding envelope is as it is, and we have to meet that as well. So we will do everything we can to continue to support the sector.
Thank you. Can I just ask one final question? Table 12 on page 28. We've got 255 children coming into our settings from outside Bracknell Forest.
Yes.
And presumably we meet the costs of those children in the settings, is that right?
Yes, we do. So children can access the funding at the setting they attend, regardless of where they live. So one of the other pieces of work that David and I are looking at is with our closest local authorities, is trying to find out how many of our children are going across the border into Wokingham, into Windsor and Maidenhead, and into Surrey, because those are on Hart as well. They're the key ones where we have a crossover. So we don't have that data yet, but it's certainly something that we want to look into a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important piece of it. That's what I was asking
absolutely.
for. And I mean, it obviously relates to Chris Taylor's school places plan as well, doesn't it? Because
absolutely.
If we know where the children are and where they're coming to, then we feed that information in. But we were assured of really good links between the childcare sufficiency assessment and Chris Taylor's school places plan last year.
Yes,
so just tying everything together.
And that work continues between David and Chris.
Yeah, good. That's good. Is there anything else that anybody wants to raise?
Yeah, Martin, can I just add a couple more points, please? I think moving forward in early years, we had our early years forum a week or so ago, and there is great excitement in early years that potentially we're going to have a 4% increase in our base rate funding. And there's been various scenarios spoken about. But I think that although we are going to get an increase, a guaranteed increase, and potentially over the next 3 years, we're only so excited because we've been so heavily underfunded and are so used to robbing Peter to pay Paul. But I think my concern is that the national living wage has actually gone up 5%. And we're not being given anything for cost of living or anything like that at all. So actually all we're going to be doing is digging our heads deeper into a hole, because any increase, don't get me wrong, is great, but it's not sustainable.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Paul, can you remind us when we set the rates for early years and that sort of thing? Is that in the spring term?
That's dependent on the timing of the release of the financial information, Martin. So we have some headline information, which is along the lines of what Sue said there. There's a big funding increase coming along, but there's big cost increases as well. So it's going to be difficult to know which one's harder than the other, or whether they're both equivalent, whether that's just therefore a good or bad deal for providers, and that will vary provider by provider depending on their cost base, and whether, as Sue says, they have a lot of people on the living wage that will get, I think it's a 6.6% increase next year in this area, or whether it will be less people on the national living wage, in which case the increase may be much smaller. But we have to bring it here no later than January with the school's budget paper, but we hope to give an update at the next meeting in December, if not with real data in it, but with some key principles about how we would like to set the budget, which we can then finalise when that information is released, and hopefully put that in the final paper in January. So that's our plan at the moment, but it is, as all these things, it's dependent on the release of the detailed information for us to do the calculations.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Just to sort of back up what Paul was saying, we have taken the scenarios to the early years forum, which Sue mentioned a week or so ago, with sort of the principles that we think will potentially work for the sector moving forward. So it's just waiting for that release now of the actual what the budget's going to look like for us before David can do the sort of work with Paul to finalise that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cherry, for a very informative report again. Can you thank your members of your team who've contributed to this?
Yes, I will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, shall we move on then to item 7 on the agenda? Am I right? Yeah, the school's budget 2021-22 budget monitoring. I mean, I just wanted to bring this forward. I mean, we're all aware of the budget problem that we've got, but I think there's been some quite subtle changes in the message that we're getting in this particular paper today. I asked a question a few meetings ago about who was responsible for the overspend and when it was going to hit us. And then in this paper, we're suddenly getting a message that the local authority is going to be responsible for the deficit, which could be £20 million in 2022-23. I think we were perhaps being, I'm not going to use the word complacent, but we were in a situation where we were thinking the DFE was going to solve this problem for us. I might be wrong in my understanding of it, but Paul, I think you're going to give us a bit of a different message this afternoon.
Oh, I think you've done a good start to it, Martin. Thank you very much. But yes, I'll build on that shortly. But yeah, I'll do quite a brief introduction, if I may, but obviously then there may be some questions to come after that. But this is an annual report that obviously comes every year just to give you an update on how the budget, the school's budget is performing, that the budgets that the local authority manages out of the dedicated schools grant this financial year. And this is data we've got at the end of September, so there's a bit of a lag in it, but this is where we are at the moment. So the format is similar to previous years, so it sets out the original budget decisions just to confirm those. It will give an update on any changes in income we might have, and there's been a few changes around the dedicated schools grant income in the High Needs block where updates data comes through the course of the year, so that's reflected now. And then there's an area of the report that sets out the current variances that are being forecast, as I say, using our September data, and there's some explanations behind that in the main body of the report. There's also a table at Annex 1, page 128, that gives that information in a tabular form, which is sometimes easy to pick those sort of things up. But the key message, I think, in terms of budget monitoring, which I think does stand out quite starkly in the report, when we put the budget together, as Martin was saying, we know there's a big budget difficulty on the High Needs block. We were expecting a £5.7 million deficit this financial year. What we're looking at now is a £7.6 million deficit, so it's gone up nearly £2 million, and that's obviously an increase towards that £20 million Martin was talking about at the end of this 3-year period of the DFE underwriting that deficit. So, I mean, that's one of the key parts, as Martin highlighted there. I mean, there's some information set out on that position from paragraph 615, which is pages 123 and 124. And that talks about how we're looking at managing that significant deficit. So, as Martin says, the DFE initially put in place a regulation that they would hold responsibility for any deficits that emerge for 3-year period, but there wasn't any real talk about what happened after that 3-year period. I guess to some extent we didn't want to ask the question, so we didn't. And now we're at the stage where at the end of the summer, the DFE did confirm in a publication of a paper that the expectation of the government is now that local authorities should be expecting to pick up any deficits at March 2023 out of their normal available resources. So the council again picks up responsibility for that £20 million debt. And the way that financial plans and budgets need to be put together for local authorities and all organisations are that you do need to have a plan about how you will cover that debt should it need to be settled, and you need to consider that as part of your budget setting process. So this becomes a very significant problem for the council at a time where we know schools are very much struggling with their budgets, local authorities are as well. We've got rising costs of care. We will have this debt to pick up. We have some balances that we've managed to maintain, but it's going to be a struggle to come up with a plan that covers this off. So there's a lot of concern across the country with local authority treasurers, although ours is a very, very big deficit proportionally as well as a cash value for us. Other local authorities are in a worse position because they don't have the same level of reserves, so they don't have a fallback position. But obviously our deficit is still increasing year on year by a huge amount, far more than the increase in income we've had in the last few years. So we do really need to get to the bottom of this and get a plan that starts to ensure that we are spending each year the amount of income we're getting, and that's part of the work that Cheryl's team are working through at the moment, and Cheryl will give you a more detailed update on that in a moment. But as I say, I'm not intending to go through any of the specific explanations in the report, but more than happy to answer any questions if you've got. But as Martin said, I think it's right that this comes just before Cheryl's report, because it does give it a bit more context, and it does confirm that what we were fearing is that the accumulated deficit is expected to come back to local authorities. But as I say, it wasn't a firm communication from the DfE. It was part of a publication on some work that had been done on case studies around how some local authorities had been managing their DSG debt and the sort of strategies they were adopting. So it's not come out in a, this is what's going to happen. It's local authorities need to do this, and it wasn't a DfE official that said that, but it was part of a working group the DfE had set up. So we've got to take that as a significant indicator of what they're planning to do.
Mm.
So we've also mentioned that the SFA are engaged in communications with local authorities that are in a difficult position like ourselves, and we said that we would expect to be involved in that at some stage. Well, we've had a couple of sessions with those now. Most of those have been around just updating them on our thinking and what we're planning to do. As you know, we've had some staff changes that we needed to then represent what we were doing, and we have a more detailed meeting scheduled with them in December where we actually present some initial plans about how we're hoping to tackle that. They're very early plans yet. When they're in a more considered position, and obviously that's the sort of thing we'll be bringing back to the schools forum as well. But we need to have that kick-off meeting with the SFA to put them fully in the picture of what our position is, so they can offer advice and hopefully provide us with some financial assistance as well.
Paul, you mentioned, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe it was a couple of years ago, time passed so quickly, that the DfE had sent out a big spreadsheet for local authorities to complete. Is that still part of their... Yeah, that's what we're working. Yeah, that's exactly what we're working with them now. It is a big spreadsheet, yeah. So we're just about finishing that now. We need to send that off to them so they've got some time to review and consider it before we meet. And then out of that, we're hoping that they'll come up with some comments, some suggestions, or in a lot of instances, we're hoping they're going to say, well, yes, you've got the right approach there. That's the sort of thing we'd expect you to do in your situation. But I think the thing I want to come back to again is that all these things take time, take a lot of time to get the outputs you're expecting in terms of the support for the children and also the cost reduction. So even if you start a program now, it's going to be 2, 3, 4 years before you see any real significant benefit from it. But we need to start it as soon as possible to get that benefit as soon as possible. So I mean, at its worst, we could, some of these measures we need to do will require some investment to start with. So it may even worsen our situation, but we need to work through those in a bit more detail. So it's, as you know, it's a huge task, but we really need to start progressing on with it and getting some payback on it. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Martin. I've got a question, but I think Richard's got his hand up as well.
Sorry, Richard. Where I can't see you. Yeah. Sorry.
Paul, can I just clarify what I think I heard you say? That the DfE said that they would cover the shortfall for the 3-year period ending in 2023, but at which point we will have a deficit of expected forecast deficit of about 20 million. My misunderstanding, or the bit I'm not clear about, is does that deficit of 20 million, is that something which Bracknell Forest will then have to take ownership of and fix, or does the clock get reset and we start from a base of 0 at that point?
Well, that's still
nice.
Yes. None of that's completely clear. As I said, what we've had is there was a communication at the end of the summer from some paper about some case studies saying local authorities should expect to pick that up from March 23. At that point in time, Bracknell Forest Council is liable for that debt. At this point in time, we're not liable for it. The DfE is saying, well, they will settle it if that debt gets called in the next 3 years. So setting your own financial plans, you can just disregard that. But come April 23, whatever that debt is, and it's looking like around £20 million, the council needs to have a plan to finance that debt, to pay back that debt when it becomes when it has to be paid. And if that debt's increasing, that becomes a bigger problem. But there's a bit of time for us to try and put our plans into place. But obviously we'll be having discussions with the ESFA. There is some money in the ESFA to help with your accumulated deficits at that point in time. How much that is, I don't know. How you access it, I don't know. But we should learn more about that through these meetings with the ESFA. So, if we're very, very, very lucky, I guess at some point they will pay off some of that deficit we've got at the end of March 23. That would be our best case scenario. Our worst case is they don't pay any of that off, and we still got to manage that down over time. And we would need it.
Sorry. Is this a change of policy then, Paul, government policy, or have we misinterpreted something that they said?
No, I think it's a case of they recognise the problem, and what they've done is they've put 3 years. There's a 3-year period where they're saying you don't need to worry about the accumulated debt. You get on with sorting out your ongoing your budget plans for the future, and then we'll come back and have discussions with you about that accumulated debt in 3 years' time. That message is clearer now than what it is when it first came out. But that's my understanding of it now, and that's the understanding of most of other local authorities I've talked to. Yes.
Thank you for that, Paul.
Okay.
Stuart?
Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question, but was there any relief in the budget? And if there was, has that been factored in, or was that after this set of numbers?
Sorry, Stuart, can you say that again? I missed the first part of your question.
So was there any relief coming down the line in the most recent budget? There was something about 30,000 extra places or whatever it might be. Has that been factored in yet?
No, the only thing that was announced in the budget for 22-23, if you recall, there was a 3-year funding settlement for schools that covered 22-23. We were talking about the extra money for early years earlier. That was out of the new spending review, which didn't cut it, because early years is not part of the normal schools funding settlement, just to confuse everything. It's separate. So there was no expectation that the education funding pot would change in any way. But they have added some money for capital investment, as you said, around the additional places for special educational need. So how we access that money again is another one of those things we've got no idea about. But it may well be that gives us a foothold to develop a facility that we can do more work in borough, and that would help us. But again, getting a capital project up and running, getting it running efficiently and effectively, that will take time as well. But there's an opportunity there for us. We need to be ready to take that when it comes along.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just be clear, Paul, that this is a Bracknell Forest Council problem in 23? It's not
what we just need to be.
So hold on a minute, Gareth.
What we have to do is
hold on, Gareth.
Learn from it.
Can I just be clear that this is a Bracknell Forest Council problem in 2023, and it's not part of the envelope of schools funding where this money is going to be found from? Is that your understanding?
No, there's no requirement for this money to come out of Bracknell Forest reserves or Bracknell Forest general income. It's we are liable for the debt because we are responsible for setting the High and East Block budget.
Yeah.
So that's a council decision. It's not a schools forum decision. It's one we do in consultation with the forum. But the option is open to the council to, make some cuts in high needs budgets and repay it back that way. So it doesn't have, there's no specification of how this debt needs to be managed or repaid or when it needs to be repaid. There needs to be an adequate plan signed off by the Director of Finance that says that we have this in hand and we can manage it along with all of our other responsibilities and all of our other income, etc.
All right. Gareth, you wanted to say something? Gareth? Okay. Gareth, I don't know what, I think he tried to interject just a minute ago, but he's doesn't seem to be there for a minute. Okay, can I just want to say something about paragraph 6.15, if I can. 6.15 seems to put the responsibility for this massive deficit that we're accumulating really around increases in pupil needs, numbers of pupils requiring additional support, and so on. Having been a member of this forum for a long time, I do want to say that we've been through all sorts of plans. You know, we had the Mandy Wilton plan, and then we had the Ian Dixon plan, and then we had the Kashif Nawaz plan. We keep on having all these plans, and we keep on losing momentum. We had a report in 2016, in June 2016, that criticised the local authority for a lack of data, a lack of partnership working, a lack of strategy, and a lack of communication. And all of that was disregarded when the new director came in at that particular time. We went down a rabbit hole of transformation, and we broke up all the teams that were supporting each other within the local authority. And whilst the council might have saved some money out of transformation, I think it's rebounded on us in the high needs block, because we lost staff, we lost expertise, we lost momentum through that process, we lost lots of really good people who knew what they were doing. And here we are again, you know, Cheryl, with her plan that she's going to talk about in a few minutes, is going to try and develop the same sorts of issues that we've been talking about since I was on the school forum for the first time in 2012. So I don't think it's just a question of increased numbers. I think that we collectively in Bracknell Forest have got to take some responsibility for the way in which this process has been managed over the past number of years. I needed to get that off my chest today, because I've thought about it for quite a long time now. Is there anything else anybody wants to say?
Martin, it's Karen. I've got my hand up, but you may.
Sorry.
You may have.
I miss. There's so many people on the screen this afternoon.
No, I'd raised my hand for similar points, Martin. So thank you for your words. I think there are maybe a few of us on here that feel very much the same, that have been here for several years, all trying to do the same thing. I've got 2 points, if I may. One is I'm still not entirely sure what the impact, I think it was 7.3, I'm just trying to find it now in my papers, what the impact actually will be on future school budgets. I don't think that's clear. Either I've missed something in the conversations that have taken place, but it's certainly not in the paper. And the second thing I wanted to ask, primarily, having read all the papers, was regarding the High Needs Block Fund. Because before we get into the nitty-gritty, but we've already dived in there, there's been a lot of work, obviously, by Cheryl and her team, but as you have rightly said, we have been at this point before. I think the school forum and the members have been very clear previously that we saw this coming and we have wanted to act previously. What I want clarification for, maybe not at this meeting, but a future meeting, is what is the responsibility of the forum? We've been here before in terms of what it is our responsibility to recommend to the council in terms of the High Needs Block budget and how it is spent. And that's why we got into the process of having a working group, so we could unpick that. We seem to have gone round in full circle. So is it possible for somebody on the forum today to explain what are our responsibilities to the high needs block budget, what we do need to agree this year about future projections, and what we're actually supposed to do at forum? Thank you.
Paul, will you have a go at that for us? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was just flicking around screens trying to call up the DFE document on powers and responsibilities in the schools forum in anticipation of that, but you're too quick. And
I tried to do the same, Paul, so thank you. I hope you found it.
I'm scrolling down. But that in summary, it's basically in terms of the high needs block. I still can't find it. I've scrolled to it too quickly. For the high needs block, it's the local authority has the decision-making power, so around setting budgets and all the financial decisions. But it's good practice to involve the schools forum in that consultation process, because obviously you and your members are delivering a lot of the services that we would ultimately commission. And what's been the practice at Bracknell Forest is that the budget has been set based on the recommendations that you've ultimately agreed, following obviously papers that we've presented to you. So it is ultimately for the local authority to decide all high needs block matters, but we do that in consultation with the schools forum. I'll try and find the exact wording now.
Okay. Are there any other comments that people want to make?
Can I come in, Martin? And apologies for intermittent attendance. And apologies again if I mispass this. I mean, my gut feeling is on the needs budget that exactly as Paul has said, every other local authority in the country is wrestling with this. And that I think if you look at the 22-23 timeframe and window, that we're talking about projected, deficits of 20 million. I was with the council yesterday where they reckon it's going to be about 140 million. So I think a couple of things. I think all we can do is to collectively work as hard as we can to make sure that the places that we find for support for our children and young people have a strong link between, quality, fit for purpose, cost, and all those sorts of things. So when we do things, we're doing them well. And elsewhere there's probably discussions about looking at the pupil place planning forward and how we can help on that. And I think the second thing is just continuing to understand better the processes that lead to that, because if you're a council taxpayer long run, you'd probably think, well, actually maybe it's not a bad thing in the long term that those that create the debts are ultimately responsible for them. I do have significant issues though with the timescale around this and the suggestion that you can just, however soft the guidance, Paul, that came out this summer, you could just flip this process in, 2 years. But I think we just got to keep on the trajectory that we're doing, with the support of schools, other providers, and working with families, just to make sure that when we, seek placements and support placements for children, that we're doing the very best we can. And I'm pretty heartened, and I think, Charlie, you can probably go into a lot more detail on this. I'm very heartened with the work that's been going on over the last, this year that has actually moved this forward. So I mean that's just my sort of comment at that stage. But to just recognise the importance of the schools forum and the work that the subgroup and others do in this, just to take this forward.
Yeah, but Gareth, I mean, very heartening to hear what you say about the previous year or the last year. But what about the 5 years before that? What about the years that we've not had a special needs manager, a substantive special educational needs manager in place? What about the time that we've been bouncing from consultant to consultant to consultant, each coming in with their different plans and their different strategies, which get abandoned as soon as they move on to another contract?
Fair comment, Martin. But the reality is that we are where we are at the moment. And I think there is greater rigor, greater focus, and greater attention to what we need to do at this point. I take the point absolutely about the past, which is why the significant input over the last year or so has been in this area, because we need to get it right. I mean, that doesn't excuse what's happened before, but the reality is I think we're making a sustainable change in intensity and actual have a very, very strong approach now, which I think will yield the results that we need to see. There have been some false starts, but you're right to challenge on that. But my comment back would be is we are where we are. I think it feels very different this time as someone who has, raised significant concerns. I mean, Cheryl will know that, right from the moment that Cheryl expressed an interest in joining Bracknell Forest, I think you were under no illusions as to how much importance we attach to this agenda. So all I can say, Martin, is, yeah, absolutely take what you're saying, but we are going to do what we need to do to get this right and get this right as fast but as sustainably as we can. And actually, I would say that, the work the consultants have done coming in, it's not all been wasted, because it actually meant, when Chris was picking it up, Cheryl was picking it up, and the work was going on the commissioning work. Actually, there was quite a lot of what had been done before that we've been able to make rapid progress from some of the input earlier. But I mean, that's where we are. But, fair criticism, fair comment. I mean, we're learning, we're going to do the best we can with this.
Okay. I've lost my page of recommendations. I think most of the recommendations on this report that we were to note it, weren't they, Paul?
Yeah, they're all to note, Martin. Yeah.
Can we assume that we've noted all of the points in the recommendations and move on to Cheryl's presentation?
Martin, do you want me to just clarify the Karen's question, because I've got the document now?
Oh, okay. Well,
if you want,
yeah.
So central spend on high needs block provision. The statutory duty is the local authority decides it. So these are the words in the DfE document. The schools forum doesn't have a statutory role in that, but good practice is to inform the forum. So their word is inform the forum. And the DfE has no statutory role in this either. So that's setting the budget on high needs block. Okay, hopefully that's clarified that.
Martin?
Yeah.
I apologise, Karen, if I've jumped in front of you. There's a fundamental issue, I think, given what Paul has just said. If in the end of 2023, the council has a responsibility for planning of how they deal with this deficit, does that mean we as school forum have to plan on having a dramatically lower high needs block budget, and therefore have to spread it in a very different way to that which we have at the moment? If we're going to have a cumulative deficit of 20 million over a 3-year period, we're overspending at the rate of 6 or 7 million a year. I can't believe that the long term we're going to be allowed to continue to overspend by 6 or 7 million a year. And the implication of that potentially is our high needs block funding will go down quite dramatically. Is that too simplistic approach, Paul? Or do we actually have to plan as a schools forum for less money going into high needs block?
Yeah, that's a difficult one to answer now, 2 or 3 years into the future. But what I would say, I would expect the deficit to be reducing significantly over the next 2 to 3 years. To how much, I don't know, and to how much the funding will increase over that period, I don't know. But the funding's been increasing by £1.5 million a year as well. So there's some positives on that as well. But a lot of it's going to depend on how effective the programme of reform that we've got through Cheryl's update in a moment. That's going to be the key to it. But it's not going to be come the 1st of April 2023. We've got to balance the budget straight away. I don't expect that to be the position. It'll be a case of we're still on a path of recovery, but we need to be showing that we are, we're going in the right direction on that, and we're making effective and pretty fast progress on it. But there'll be other people will make those decisions, not so much me. But that's my view of where we are now and what's likely to happen in the next couple of years.
But sorry, Paul, if we're overspending by, let's use 6 million just for the sake of convenience, and if you look at the levers that are there to try and reduce that spend, the biggest outcome of that is if you did away with all the external provision and saved the 1 million of transport costs, and you saved the approximately 1 million of incremental costs that we pay to have that provision outside, that's only 2 of the 6 million. Are we going to save another 4 million plus the long-term reduction of that debt by internal provision within the borough for all of the needs that we've got. That's my worry, that I'm struggling to see how we're going to achieve such a dramatic reduction in costs without actually reducing the provision that we make to the children, for which we have a statutory responsibility, or the council has a statutory responsibility.
Richard, can I suggest that we note that and we move forward? I mean, I think we all get the point that you're making, but I don't think we're going to be able to resolve it this afternoon without more information. Nicola, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I just, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point really in the debate, because I think it's really helpful that the forum understands. I think the fundamental first step, which underpins any efforts for getting to grip on the high needs spending, and I think, as has already been pointed out, we're one of many local authorities, is reaching the point where I think schools understand that overspending on the high needs block is not just the local authority problem. So the actions that schools take and the decisions they make about whether and how they can meet a child's needs do have that fundamental impact on the overall cost of educating children and SEND in our local area. I think the critical bit for me is that we're creating the partnership with schools, and this forum is an excellent mechanism for doing that, because collectively we've got to foster and understand what the deep-rooted issues are, and then move to joint ownership. And that is how we're going to get those collective, it's the collective problem solving, right, which is critical. So I think these debates are really good to hear, and I think, you know, it's really important that we joint own, you know, it's a shared ownership of the funding issue. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Nicola. Paul, I'm sorry, I moved on a little bit too quickly. You also put in some information into that school's budget paper about the capital programme. I'm assuming that's just an update. There's nothing that we need to discuss, is there?
No, again, I mean, the capital programme is quite small these days. So yeah, but it's just an information update. You can see the sort of schemes we're running in that Annex 2, I think it is. I don't know if you can see, Martin, Grant's got his hand up as well.
Grant, sorry. There's so many people on the screen. I'm just...
Not at all, Martin. I just wanted to respond to what Nicola said, because my cynical ear, that sounded a bit like it's the school's fault that budget's overspent. What I would be saying is that when we put a provision map in, it reflects the costs to the school to meet the needs of the children. And what I really worry is that sounds like there'll be less money for schools to do that. And I hope that isn't the case, because I think that's what Richard was saying. And I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't what you were saying, because it sounded a bit like it to me.
No, no. Can I just assure you that is definitely not the case. And in fact, in all the local authorities I've worked in, it's about investment in the early help and taking away some of the bureaucracy. And I think we need to be really clear that when the legislation was brought in, it was to do with moving the need for the statutory assessment process to earlier help. That is what we want to do, and we'll be working with school leaders to be able to get to that point. I absolutely want to be clear that that is not the position that I think, you know, we'll be taking. I know Cheryl will back that up in a moment with the presentation.
Thank you. Okay, Cheryl, have we given you a big enough build-up? Can we?
My goodness, what a lead-in! How can I do that?
Okay, let's move to agenda item 5 then, and hear from Cheryl.
Okay, can I just open by saying I take on board everything you're saying. You know, I've only recently joined the council in June, but as Gareth said, I was under no illusions. There were jobs to be done. And throughout my career, I've always taken on challenges and I've always delivered. And although I think my first few weeks, quite a few head teachers were going, do you really know what you've taken on? And a few comments were, this will never get fixed. It's broken, it will never be fixed. Well, if we take that attitude, we might as well all go home now, because everything can be fixed, providing we are clear what we're trying to do and we're very clear how we're managing it all. And I just want to say thank you to those colleagues that are here tonight as well, who we've been having interesting dialogues around. And for me, the first thing is meeting the needs of the individual child. I think, Martin, you're right, we haven't met the needs of our individual children. We can do that better. The second thing is, with systems, processes, and the plans that we've been talking about, we can actually do it more effectively, more efficiently. And just by looking at some budgets at the beginning of the month, Nicola identified a £500,000 saving. So that's just in one fell swoop. There's a lot more work to be done yet. I'm going to take you through some of the things that we've been doing. Some work started before my time. Really grateful for colleagues who've been inputting into that. And yes, there have been a lot of consultants and there have been lots of directions, but we've got one clear direction now. People are on board. We're actually clear where we're going. We've run this past the ESFA. I think Nicola, Paul and myself had a meeting a few weeks ago, and Nicola said, so before you ask us what we're doing, tell us what the trends are across the country. And as Paul said, there are more EHCPs, there are increased costs. Everyone else is doing the same thing, hitting the same problems. So therefore we have to be really creative, because a lot of people haven't got the solution. I think we have. So I'll take you through some of the actual projects that are on the go currently. I also want to link in how we're going to drive forward the agenda for Bracknell, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Reference back to my slides that I sent out to you. So the high needs block is, there's a project manager. They meet monthly. All stakeholders are involved. And it started out with the aim of reducing the deficit and implementing and monitoring key elements of a commissioning plan. Now, that's one of the things we need to be aware of. Until 2020, there was no commissioning plan. Commissioning did not have any role in SEND. That is a huge move forward. And as I go through, you will see the role that commissioning are playing, and they will help us start to recoup some money. The other thing, Martin, I just wanted to pick up, you were talking about how in the past there were really high quality staff and that people have left and it's been difficult to recruit to. I've inherited that. And when I talk about the restructures, I've made it very clear, and I have got full backing of members, chief executive, CMT, that it will not be about cutting costs and saving money. It is about appointing the right people with the right skill sets and paying them the right salary. So that is all agreed. And there is full support on this because the council want to fix it and move it forward.
Cheryl, would you mind if I just add one more thing to that?
Yes, of course.
And that is giving people achievable job descriptions. Because
yes.
In the past, what we've suffered from is people trying to do a whole range of different things.
Yes.
Which is beyond their, not beyond their competence, but beyond their ability in the time that they've had available. And that's where we've fallen down in terms of some of the processes and some of the procedures and some of the meeting of young people's needs.
I totally agree. So it's not just the SEND team, it's all the teams in children's support services. I've been looking across the whole area, and we've restructured the SEND team, and we'll be going to advert for the new jobs in January. The other teams, we've been working at systems, processes, how can we integrate the teams better? And I've I'm on the point of making some movements to take other teams out so there is a better focus. And the role managing all this that Nicola is currently holding, that's got to be looked at as well. And I am aware that Nicola's predecessor found it very, very difficult. And people now realise, and there's full support to restructure all this. So plans are afoot. So I recognise that, the council recognise it, and we are doing something about it. So currently I've restructured school standards, and we are working our way through the children's support services as well. They're my first two priorities. So I think we're turning a corner, and it does make sense. So would you like me to continue?
Yes, certainly. Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to set out the scopes. The high needs block scope has been really well project managed by the lead manager there. And we are holding people to account. Stakeholders are all coming together. So just on that first slide that you all received, it talked about how we spent 4.8 million in 2021 and how the forecast currently, if we do nothing at all to change anything, is likely to project to 20.9 million. So we've got no choice. We've got to do something differently, because what we're doing now is not working. One, it's not meeting the needs of the children. Two, it's not meeting the needs of the schools. And three, we can't continue to spend at this rate, and yet we can't evidence the outcomes are where we want them to be. So it's a non-negotiable. In the slides, I gave you an outline of the project work streams. So governance framework and processes, we've been looking at all that. Building relationships, I feel there's a lot of work to be done around that. I'm really appreciative of colleagues that have given up time, head teachers and stakeholders to work with us. And we've been working really hard, and we have found that there have been some poor relationships and non-communication with elements of the SEND community. And we're working to address that and put regular meetings in. And we tell people we are willing to listen, we want to hear, and we want to get this right. So just moving on, we've got service and process reviews. The data, we've been working with finance, and Chris Taylor's working on the SEND projection data. So between commissioning and finance, we've managed to bring together 5 years of data for SEN, of individual children, trends, developing need, and we're now in a position that we can start modelling what that projection is going forward. It's really sad to say we haven't been in that position previously. We're just in that position now. And I believe some head teachers were asking about data, and I know Richard was asking for data. So we're just on the point of bringing it together and modelling demand for the next 5 to 10 years, so we can build on that and we know what we need. Next thing was developing the market. We've opened 6 new SRPs at primary schools. The RISE, very successful SRP, but we know there's more to be done around that. Thank you to the high needs block subgroup who were meeting monthly, occasionally it's weekly. The work around SRPs, that's really been valued. Colleagues have been absolutely fantastic and spent a lot of times. We found that the service level agreement that was initially drafted, there were bits missing. And as a group, we've gone through it. We've enlisted legal support to check that it's clear, it meets our needs, and we're in a stronger position now. And we now feel comfortable as a group that we have got a strong SLA for the SRPs and a clear process. Another piece of work, many thanks to Jenny and head teachers here again, the banding matrix, the research that's been done. A lot of that was done far before my time. We're now working on that to develop it and to look at the process, how we can implement it and Paul is working on the funding linked up to that. So again, we're all joined up. We have a clear agenda. This is what we need to do. And then priorities and deliverables, top-up funding is another area. What I didn't realise until my lovely friend Stuart Matthews pointed out, for some reason Bracknell Forest had a policy that if you didn't have an EHCP, you couldn't get top-up funding. Well, that's not acceptable. So we've re-looked at that. We need to have a clear process for top-up funding. And Nicola's been working on tiers of panels so that we're absolutely clear, we have consistency, and that going forward, we are going to give top-up funding without an EHCP, but we will need a process around that. That way we feel schools can then better manage and put the provision in place that they need to. So until we'd thought about top-up funding, as you can appreciate, if a school had to produce an EHCP for a child, which incidentally costs between £2,000 and £5,000 per EHCP, another cost. Once the EHCP was in place, then people had moved beyond top-up funding. So parents were considering, well, should I send my child to an independent school? And once that starts rolling and we haven't got the provision locally, that's almost impossible to stop. And I'm just going to give colleagues a reminder. So the cheapest independent placement I'm aware of is around about £53,000 per child per year, plus possibly with other additional support on top. An average is around about £88,000 per child per year. And the very top end, if you look, include residential, is £250,000 per child per year. And that is not sustainable. So we've got to look at the quality of the provision we can deliver in Bracknell Forest. We have to be in a position where we can work with our schools to look at how we can develop that provision. And I would much rather spend the £17+ million that is going out of borough in our schools with children, so our children are educated locally and they live in their community and go to school in their community. So that's another big piece of work. And we've actually had to do a lot of digging to find the data and actually understand, which I understand from colleagues hasn't happened previously. So we are informed and we're looking at, so how can we move this forward? And the last bit of the big project work stream was commissioning. So previously we were spot purchasing places. When Nicola and I were going through finance and invoices, we found that for almost the identical provision in the same school, we were being charged a different amount, and we couldn't work out why. So by working with commissioning, we are agreeing costs. We are commissioning are working on value for money placements. The other thing is due diligence, quality assurance. That hasn't been in place. That is now in place. We're working on that. We want our children to be in high quality places. We need to know we're getting value for money, and we need to monitor their outcomes. So all those are pieces of work on the go. I'm just going to move on. The one thing I wanted to flag with you was there's a piece around Capital One.
Yeah.
Historically, the SEND team have just worked with spreadsheets, and it's been really difficult to have that big overview. And there's a piece of work in the high needs block around Capital One. We've got 2 project managers working with Capital One. We've identified a product for EHCPs, and we're looking at how we can integrate it into our system. The thing about this product is that it captures everything. It centralizes the system, and when it's all up and running, schools can check on progress of EHCPs and on reviews, and so can parents. And as people have pointed out to us in the past, communications haven't been clear. People have found it difficult to access that information. So we're trying to open this up, be efficient, be effective, and the cost of the software isn't a huge amount, and it will probably save us money in the long run. So just moving on, building relationships. We've been setting up meetings. Nicola alluded to the SENCO meetings. We're doing locality team meetings, which I'll come to in a minute. We want to meet our groups of schools. We want to meet them in their north, south, or Crowthorne and Sandhurst localities.
Sorry, Martin, just apologies. I can't hear this. I'm going to have to leave the meeting. I'm really sorry. If there are any questions, please let Cheryl know and I can pick up on them. Okay, I'm just okay. Sorry.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thanks, Gareth.
So it's really important that we work with Parent and Carer Forum, SENDIAS, head teacher groups, as I said, SENCOs, stakeholders, health, social care, education. We need to be more integrated. All that is being worked on. I'm just going to move on now through my slides. Service review, that was slide 15. That is now complete. It's job descriptions have been written. They're just being signed off. I met with the chief exec today, and he was very, very clear that the jobs have to be quality, they have to be fit for purpose, and the salaries have to be appropriate to the quality of people we wish to recruit. He's 100% supportive, and so are members around that. So we've moved forward on that. We are looking to start recruitment in January for the SEND team. Process review and assessments. Nicola has developed systems. They have daily reporting. We inherited a backlog. I'll be honest, there was a backlog of applications and a backlog of EHCPs that were not completed in time. Nicola has systems up and running. Every morning they meet for 1 hour, each team, and they have to report back progress. And Nicola is driving that at pace with staff. It's a new system. They're finding it tough because they're not used to having to report back. But
can I ask, Cheryl, how many of these people are interim members of staff?
I would say about 80% of the team.
And I mean, and there's a problem there, isn't there? Because they've got no. I'm going to be frank. They've got no allegiance to Bracknell Forest.
Exactly.
They've got no knowledge of Bracknell Forest schools. They might be located all over the country, and they've got no knowledge of our local provision market. And that must be compounding the problem.
No, it isn't, because the SEND team, the knowledge of the local market are the professionals, the ed psychs and the specialist teachers. The SEND team itself are process EHCPs. It's the professionals that input the knowledge. It is a process, and the process is driven by working through systems. So it's a very different thing when you're on the inside looking at this, and it's all very doable. Nicola, would you like to just add in any information around that?
No, I think I think it's a really important point, and I think one of the things we needed to shift is that in the reason why a lot of, I think, local authorities have found themselves in a similar position to us is that I think very often it is down to the case officers and the SEND team who have picked up the burden in this area, but actually it's everybody's responsibility. And what we're shifting back to is the wider specialised teams working with the school leaders to understand what that early preventative work is that we can do to put in place. So I think, in terms of our support staff or our and you're absolutely spot on, you know, the interim market is volatile, but I think we're already addressing that because we are putting permanent posts in place by early next year. We know that that's a really critical factor, but the shift is coming, you know, as we're working with the specialised teams to take more of that oversight and responsibility in terms of the placements and, you know, the more specialist complex provision.
And Martin, just to follow that up, so part of the problem, as you've alluded to, has been agency staff. And agency staff, there's no great allegiance. They can leave within a month. And what we've had to do is actually drive through and take people with us. And we're actually finding out the staff who do take it responsibility and they do sort of face up to things. And we have got a number of the agency staff that we've already started a dialogue with because they've been very impressive. And they're the people we wish to keep. But we do want to recruit good people from January. And that is part of the process. Part of the problem actually has been the transformation team been working on this for a year. And so we haven't been able to recruit substantive staff because everything's been changing. So it's quite a relief to come to the end of the transformation project for restructure, because we need committed local people willing to do a really good job and take this seriously. So you're absolutely spot on.
I'd suggest that the transformation project's been going on for more than a year.
Well,
you know,
this particular one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so just moving on. So sufficiency plan, and we've been looking at primary needs. We've been looking at placements, and there was detail in there about the SRPs. Tonight with us are a number of heads who are running SRPs. Big thank you to them because they're doing a fabulous job, but we need to develop more, and we need to develop secondary provision. If we're developing provision at primary, we need somewhere for the young people to go to progress to. And we also have to recognise we need probably more complex specialist provision locally. And that's the piece of work we need to do, not only with our data, but with our schools to identify what that looks like, and then work with the experts in our sector, such as Kennel Lane, and identify what additional provision can be put in place, because anything local will be certainly far more cost effective than anything externally.
Yeah.
Banding matrix I alluded to, just to reassure people that DFE actually what we're going to propose in early intervention and locality model is exactly what the DFE is now proposing. And we really want children educated locally if we can in the majority of places, but making sure we support that provision and make sure that we don't expect schools to do it with no support, and that we're not expecting it on the cheap. We have to do the right thing. So I gave you key deliverables and priorities, and the key metrics are greater inclusion of children in local schools, fewer pupils in segregated independent provision. We need to reduce our complaints, mediations, appeals and tribunals because that's distracting us from the job. We need to reduce exclusions, and by working with schools to support earlier and making sure schools have the right support, we can do that. We need to have less demand for external places, and that will reduce the pressure on the high cost provision. And the key thing for me is improving outcomes for our young people. That has to be at the centre of what we're doing. So the challenge is, disruption of the restructure, long-standing systemic issues around governance and allocation of resources. We need to change the culture and the way we work, and we need to co-produce with all partners, and we need to improve our comms right the way through. So I gave some example commissioning. The last 2 slides I sent you were the 2 slides from the change board. So Gráinne Siggins has introduced a change board, which again, we are scrutinised at, we have to report against, and it's looking at, from a finance point of view, how we're meeting our targets and how we're actually working towards reducing the high needs block. But for me, it's not just reducing the overspend, it's also making sure we have quality provision. And the model I'm going to refer to, the capital strategy, we know we have projected empty places. We don't want to lose those places or the accommodation. Therefore, we need to think about how we can make better use. We know there's an identified demand for SEND places. It makes a lot of sense to develop on-site extra provision, working with all our partners to meet that SEND demand. If we can meet SEND demand more locally, we're going to reduce costs, in time reduce the high needs block. We can invest the high needs block in Bracknell schools and locally rather than externally. But we have to accept there will always be a small number of very complex cases that we won't be able to meet their needs. And that's fine, providing we're thinking about what the child needs. But going forward, with the support of colleagues here tonight and other colleagues across the community, we're working on a strategy for places, a strategy for developing our SEND provision, working with schools so they get early support, working on a more localised model. And in time, that's going to bring down the cost. But actually, the first thing for me, it's improving the quality of provision for our young people and that our schools feel more supported in what they're doing. Because I know head teachers here tonight want to meet the needs of the young people, but they're really frustrated because either there's not the provision or there's not the funding to do that. And I'm a very determined person, Martin. I will make it happen because I've got a great team around me. And
don't leave then, Cheryl.
I've got a willingness from colleagues here tonight because we want it. And I can see Richard's got his hand up.
Yeah, so let's have some questions from members of the forum then. Richard.
So I've traditionally been one of the more challenging members of the forum, a bit like Martin. So let me give credit where credit is due. I have actually seen evidence of the interim funding, or whatever the phrase is, before EHCPs have happened. So 10 out of 10 to the team for making that happen. For many years, I've been involved on the other side of the fence, I suspect a bit like Nicola, providing consultancy to other companies. And if you've got people who are currently consultants that you think might be interested long-term in working directly for Bracknell Forest, then a key question you should be asking, in my opinion, is are all the jobs that, all of the roles that you've currently got consultants in, are they defined as being inside IR35? Because that, more than anything else, will encourage people to come and join on the dark side, if you like, rather than continue as a consultant. That's got dramatically more difficult for people who traditionally have worked as independent consultants. So please take that away as a thought. And I suspect Nicola may not like hearing that. I have no idea what your status is, Nicola, but
I'm not a consultant.
Oh, sorry. Okay, in that case, apologise. But that is actually a very, very strong lever that is in your armoury to use in terms of encouraging people to come and work on a permanent, full-time employed basis, rather than the other way. That's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Richard. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the forum? I can't see any hands going up.
Martin, can I just add something then? Colleagues, I've thanked you. I really do mean it. Thank you very much for the support you've been giving us. I know it's close to your heart. You all want it fixed. I want to fix it. I've got people behind me who are willing to support us in this. But if you do have either concerns, please flag them up, because if I know, I can do something. But secondly, if you feel you can input, will you please get in touch? Because we want to hear from people. We want to get this right, and we want to have all the input and feedback, because we can't do it without you. And so thank you everyone for that.
Thank you. Can I just make one other point? It's about the high needs block subgroup that we commissioned as part of the schools forum. I'm feeling that we probably don't need to keep that in its present form, because it seems to me that other things are happening, other groups are naturally forming around particular topics and so on. And I think that if we are going to disband that group, it needs to be a decision of the schools forum that we don't go ahead with it anymore. I don't know what other people think, but I've not been invited to a meeting for over 6 months now. And I was a member of that high needs block subgroup. Richards wants to chip in on that as well.
Jenny's the one who's been leading that, and there have been, I think it's fair to say, Jenny, 2 critical pieces of work coming out of that. What would be criminal is if those 2 pieces of work get thrown away. So if the intention is to bring it to a close, please can we ensure that those 2 critical pieces of work have been accepted and get carried forward as part of Cheryl and Nicola's plans, rather than just simply stop and lose the benefit of 2 years worth of work.
No, absolutely.
So,
I wouldn't. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that I'm not sure that a schools forum commissioned high needs block group is appropriate anymore. Karen,
Martin, can I butt in? Because I think we were probably some of the founder members of that. I've listened carefully to what everybody said, and I think, we are all in agreement. This is close to our hearts, and we've been trying to do this for a lot of years. So what we've heard tonight is what we want to hear. Equally, that's why I asked the question of Paul, what is our role as school forum? That was my intention, to ask that question, so I understood what role we had to have moving forward. So do we need to pause and just think whether there is a need for a subgroup, so that we have what we need at this meeting in plenty of time, so we can make any decisions or recommendations that we need to make, and we have all the information we need to make any decisions or recommendations we need to make. I think that was the purpose of it to start with.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't really help answer your question.
Are there any other comments?
Can I just come in there, please, Martin?
Yes, of course.
So the work that we've done with the matrix and SRPs and SLAs, I think it was the meeting in the summer, my first meeting when you weren't present and Stuart was stepping in.
Yeah, blame Stuart. Yeah.
I was asked by the high needs block to come forward and request that the schools forum subgroup work with me on those pieces of work. And I put it to colleagues and they agreed. And out of that, this is the group that we're working. We've still got a lot to do. I would to lose it. I think you have had momentum. It's been fantastic. Jenny's been chairing. Everyone's worked really, really hard at these areas. And I think we're going to identify further areas of work. I suppose what you're saying is, does that need to continue outside the schools forum? I don't know, but I would hate to lose the work that we've done with that group. And there are further bits of work in the future that we need their input. Otherwise, we can't do the work.
Okay. Well,
Jenny coming in there.
Jenny? Jenny, did you
I'm happy. Sorry, I'm happy. I've got childcare issues. I'm happy to support wherever possible and where everybody thinks fit and relevant. Really, as everybody's aware, Kashif used to chair the subcommittee, schools forum subcommittee, and I volunteered to take it over and support with that in January last year. So I think it was obviously set up on a needs basis to look at reducing the deficit and do specific pieces of work in terms of reducing the deficit. And if there are further projects that need to carry on that group can support with, then I'm happy to continue to chair it.
Well, can we suggest then that we just convene that group whenever it's appropriate, whenever Cheryl needs it, or whenever Jenny thinks there's a pressing need to have a subgroup? Let's just leave it that it exists and will be convened as necessary. Is that an acceptable way forward?
Martin, could I just say that I think it would be handy at the next schools forum if we just give an update of what we've been doing.
Okay.
Everyone here is aware. Do you think that's doable, Jenny?
Yeah, I'm happy to provide that update.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that we move on to the next agenda item, which is also one that I think either Paul or Cheryl is going to propose. Is that right? I'm not quite sure who's leading on this one. Cheryl, is it you?
No, I'm assuming it's me, Martin.
Oh, okay, Paul.
Sorry, unless you want to, Cheryl. Okay, thank you then, Martin. Yeah, so this is agenda item 7. It's a tricky paper in that you'll see from the recommendation that there's a new consultation out on how local authorities should be funded for school improvement services. There's some changes needed by April 2022, but we need to make decisions around that at the very latest at the 13th of January schools forum meeting, and it's basically seeking some guidance around what level the schools forum is comfortable to make decisions on behalf of all schools, what sort of consultation you might want us to undertake with schools in the very limited time we have available. And part of that process may involve agreeing to slip back the 9th of December meeting a little bit, just to allow a bit more work to be done. But that's what makes this report particularly tricky, because there is a need to try and get some consensus out of you tonight as to how you want us to take this forward. So very briefly, this is a consultation that came out in November. It's about the DfE looking to withdraw a grant that currently funds school improvement services in local authorities. This year we got £115,000, and that's basically there to support schools, local authorities with their school improvement duties. And what we've been using that money for basically is around £40,000 to support part of the costs of the steps and the school monitoring boards, and £75,000 is then allocated out to those schools that are being supported to procure external support, which may be something like additional training, additional temporary hours for staff. It could be an executive head support on a part-time basis, that sort of thing. So that's how the money's being used at the moment. And what the DfE is saying, well, in the next 2 years, we're going to cut that grant completely. We're going to phase it out by a 50% reduction from April 22-23. And from that point in time, the way that these services should be funded is through the de-delegation route. So this is a service that's focused on maintained schools, and maintained schools will be aware that the de-delegated services are funded by returning money back to local authorities on a per pupil basis to reconstitute a central service is then targeted towards the schools that need it through whatever criteria and policy we have in place. And I think the issue around here is that it's very difficult to specify exactly what that school improvement service should be. If you see from the paper that the DfE is suggesting it's distinguished into 2 parts. It's core school improvement, which basically covers the LA holding powers to warn and intervene in schools causing concern. And there's additional support arrangements as well, which you can develop locally that schools want, that will be outside that very narrow statutory provision basis. And the size and scale and scope of that will be dependent on what you wanted to provide locally with your schools. So we're obviously in a position now where the service is being funded part by local authority, part by grant, part by traded income. So there's lots of different ways that the service is being funded. And what the paper is proposing is that we should look at this over a 2-year period. And in terms of ease of continuity of service, we're suggesting that for 22-23, when the grant gets reduced to half its value in this year, which we expect to be about £50,000, that grant funding should continue to be used to support the steps and the standards monitoring boards in the way that it's used at the moment. But there'll be no additional funding to support schools with targeted support arrangements. But during the interim period, we then do a piece of work with schools that we do actually define what those elements of the service are, splitting it between the core activities, what we should really be doing in line of those statutory duties, and what additional support services you would want. And then they in future would be delivered through a de-delegated route. So for 22-23, the expectation would be that if that proposal is agreed, that the grant funding would mean that the school improvement cost of the school improvement service would be fully funded as it is on the same basis now, and there would be no deduction for de-delegations for maintained schools. But from 23-24, the whole service would need to be funded through a de-delegated route, and that would be a per pupil deduction for each school. And that's the piece of work we need to spend quite a bit of time on, I would suggest, to get that right and to reflect what schools want. And as I said, we've got until the 13th of January to agree that through the schools forum. So that's a drop dead deadline. Those papers need to be finished by the 4th of January. We've got our next meeting on the 9th of December, and those papers need to be finished by the end of this month. So we've got less than 2 weeks to do that effectively. So there is some possibility of slipping that meeting, is what I'm saying. I think it comes down to whether you as a forum are prepared to make a decision on behalf of all schools, or whether you want some consultation with schools. And if you want some consultation with schools, that will have to be quite a small period. And we'd need to factor in when that came back for you to do a decision. So it's not the sort of paper I'd like to present to you. It's not very clear on what we can do. We put together a proposal, but it's very much something that's come out very, very short notice. No notice that it was coming, and obviously we've got a short amount of time to deal with it. So hopefully, having read the paper and that overall summary, that does clarify what we're proposing to do with this paper. But obviously, happy to take any questions, and I'm sure Cheryl will be able to help on that as well.
Are there any questions for Paul on this? Richard?
Sorry, seems like I'm coming in with all the questions. I have personal experience of this, and you're in the somewhat unusual situation where a school is cause for concern. Usually something inside the school isn't working the way it should do, and either belatedly or whatever, governors have realised this in conjunction with the STEP. So to me, it is a vital independent service that I, for one, would support very strongly going forward, even at the cost of some of the money on the per child basis being taken back. And it's difficult because it's for the common good. So you have to take it from everybody for the times when a school has this problem of being cause for concern. But my personal experience of it is it's something that's absolutely necessary, and I would support 100% the way it's been done in the past, even at that cost.
Yeah, I'd endorse that comment, Richard, from previous experience as well. And I think it's a really valuable service that is provided. Any other comments? Paul, you're asking us if we want to essentially have a quick consultation and sit the meeting from the 9th of December to later in December. I personally would be very reluctant to do that, because it means we have 2 meetings quite close together, and I'm sure schools wouldn't welcome having a schools forum meeting much later than the 9th of December, quite frankly.
I'm not asking for another meeting, Martin. It would be
not another meeting.
No, but just
in terms of timing, I'm thinking, postponing the 9th of December meeting to later in December. I just don't think that will be fair on the members of the forum, quite frankly. Others know from you?
can we get a view of the members of the school forum? If there's a majority view in schools forum, then I would suggest, given the urgent timescales associated with this and the fact that it's a two-stage decision, that we recognise that it's the lesser of two evils, that this group of people actually vote and we move forward on at least the first part of this, so that we can get it done in the time that's available.
Okay. What do others think?
In there. Just to say one, coming into the authority new, school improvement has been my bread and butter for so many years. You've got a really strong system in Bracknell. I can't share because we've had lots of inspections in the last few weeks, but it's really, really paid dividends for Bracknell Forest schools. When I looked at the data before I applied for the job, you were way below national. I came in the summer, you were 83% good or better, Ofsted. You had a school inspection in the summer, you went to national. And the track record of the processes of the team. And I know Sharon's leaving, but we have got a successor for her, interim, and everyone will be pleased when I share that information. That is going to continue and drive forward. So there is a strong process. It turns around schools. It supports schools when they need it. I don't feel quite 100% Bracknell Forest. So as someone who's looked from the outside in, I would recommend for colleagues to think long and carefully, because it does provide a good service, a quality service, delivers results. And I really appreciate that, you need to go away and think about it. And the only reason Paul and I thought it was the right time to bring it now is that there's a very short lead into this. And Paul wanted some feedback as to what direction of travel we should go. So executive members are very supportive, but it would make a big difference for that school standards team to have some security and know where they're going over the next year or so. So that's the information from me. But I would support it. If I was a head teacher, I would support it.
Martin, may I interject there? Yeah. Because I know many of us have got other meetings to go to, and I can see the chat. My gut reaction from my colleagues is many on this call, head teachers, actually have done that work and involved in that school improvement plan and process. So we are in favour of what we've got in place in Bracknell. With my gut reaction, I think everybody's tired because we're not quite sure what we're agreeing to here. I think we're agreeing to looking at this again at the next meeting. Is that what we're agreeing to?
Paul?
Well, you can do it two ways.
Sorry, I think
what we're asking for is, in principle, do you agree that we continue with the current arrangements for one more year into 22-23? So the remaining grant that comes through is used for the same purpose to support the STEPS and the standards monitoring boards. But during the interim, we do a thorough review of all the services provided by the school improvement team, work in consultation with schools and structure a service going forward and how that is funded for implementation from 2023-24. So not next financial year, the year after that. And the question is, are you happy to make that decision now as a school forum, or do you want to go away and speak to your colleagues about it, other head teachers? If you're confident of doing that decision now and you're happy with the proposal, then we can do it now. Otherwise, we just need some feedback of how you want to take this forward.
So my understanding is that we can make that decision on our next meeting, which is on the
9th of December. Yeah, that's perfect.
That obviously, if that's possible, but that leaves you with a very short Christmas yet again, Paul.
What's a Christmas, eh?
I don't think you've had one for several years. So my proposal, albeit harsh, would be, can we bring that back to the 9th of December?
What more would you expect to come at the 9th of December then, Karen? That's what I'll ask.
I think it is that at this stage we would like to just check in with we always like to check in with our members.
Okay, that sounds fine.
Have you got a view?
Yeah, sounds perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe's coming in.
Yeah, no, just to say, I would be very uncomfortable making a decision. Money is very tight in schools at the moment, and I think I would be more comfortable if there was some consultation before that decision is made on behalf of other people. So I agree. I think 9th of December to bring it back to, if that's all right.
Paul, can you do your best to facilitate that then for us?
Yeah, I will. Certainly. Is it through Debbie and Liz Cole then? Is that the best way to do it? Through the representatives, or is it something that goes out to everyone? I like everyone. I don't want to prolong this meeting any longer than it's gone. Oh, Liz is here now. So you're on mute, Liz.
Swear then. I've been here the whole time. My view would be is that let me consult with primary heads, because I think it is important. Although I can see the benefit, I do think it's an important decision, and I can get that back to you by the 9th.
Okay. Is that paper all right as it is now, or is that too long or something? Is that something you would like to share with your colleagues?
Well, I'll probably share, maybe not in its entirety, because I think if you want to send me a précis, that'd be even better. But if you don't, then I would, that'd be useful.
Okay, I'll send you a couple of slides I did for the bursars today. Okay.
And I will get that back for you for the 9th.
Okay. All right. I'm fine with that, as if everyone else is, and then we'll come back for a formal decision then.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. I'm sorry, I've let time run away a little bit this evening. So can we move to agenda item 8 then, please? Paul, I don't know whether you just want to say a few words, or is this paper sufficiently understandable for everybody to look at the recommendations that we've got?
I would hope it's an annual report. You've seen it lots of times. Very consistent message. So hopefully you're all going to say yes, 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 yes. I'll say no more.
Okay. Is everybody happy that we do it that way, or are there other questions that people want to put to Paul? No? Okay, so let's just look at the recommendations. Now, this is a little bit complicated, but for all of us, we need to note the outcomes of the financial consultation with schools, as summarised in the supporting information in Annex 1. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
And that the executive member for Children, Young People and Learning is asked to agree that all schools should get the +2% increase in per pupil funding, and any costs associated with providing all schools with the minimum percentage should be met by those schools receiving the largest increases in per pupil funding. Is everybody happy with that, those two proposals?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. This is for maintained primary school representatives only. You're asked to agree the continued dedelegation of budgets for services requested by the council. Is that okay?
For the existing services, that can't be a blank check.
To agree the continued dedelegation of budgets for the services requested by the council. Yeah.
Yeah, we have only requested, it's the services requested in the consultation document. Yeah, it's only those ones.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Items for maintained secondary school representatives only. The same question, to agree the continued dedelegation of budgets for the services requested by the council.
Yes.
Debbie, is that, and Keith, yeah, happy?
Yes.
Thank you. Where are we? All maintained school representatives, including the special and Peru, to agree the £20 per pupil delegation continues from maintained schools towards the cost of delivering general education related statutory and regulatory duties.
Yes.
We happy with that?
Yeah.
Reluctantly, yeah. And 3.6, to agree the proposed updates to the scheme for financing schools. Are people happy? This is for the whole forum. Are people happy for that revised scheme to be accepted? Yes?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Right, good. I mean, we've given the most important item a good airing tonight, and you know, I'm very grateful to everybody that's contributed to that. That's the end of our meeting this evening. Our next meeting is on the 9th of December then. So I'll see you all then. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Martin. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Martin.